Welcome back to Three Times a Victim. I'm Sarah, joined as always by Marcus. In this episode, we enter one of the most harrowing yet transformative parts of Bruce Whealton's story, chapters 23 and 24, which take us deep into trauma therapy and the moment that nearly ended his life.
These chapters pull us into the emotional core of Three Times a Victim. For the first time, Bruce opens the door on what it really means to live with trauma that never stops echoing. Chapter 23, Trauma Therapy, begins with him realizing that ordinary talk therapy never touched the pain. The questions, how does that make you feel? Or can you reframe this? Only skim the surface of something much deeper.
Exactly. Bruce had spent years locked inside his own silence, too numb to feel much of anything. He wasn't just dealing with memories. He was dealing with the total loss of self that follows betrayal and injustice. So when he finds Andrea, a trauma therapist who practices EMDR, everything changes.
And it's fascinating how he describes the sessions. They're not about talking, they're about reliving. Eye movement therapy, tactile grounding devices, the rhythm of bilateral stimulation. All of it becomes a way to reach the places where words can't go.
He's no longer the therapist in the chair. He's the patient. He revisits memories he's avoided for decades. The arrest, the handcuffs, the silence of jail, the moment when the police decided the truth before he even spoke. There's something devastating about reading that scene. The man covered in blood who called 911 for help, treated as the criminal instead of the victim.
And the therapy allows him to finally feel what he couldn't at the time. He recalls the helplessness of watching Lynn suffer, the grief of leaving her hospital room, the guilt of feeling like he'd failed to protect her. But Andrea helps him visualize that pain, externalize it. Dark ash, soot leaving his body, sealed away in a freezer. It's symbolic, but it's also practical. It gives shape to something that had always been formless.
One of the most powerful parts for me was when he learns to reclaim anger. Not destructive anger, but the clean, righteous kind that says, this should not have happened. After years of fearing his own emotion, believing that anger could make him look dangerous, he finally realizes it's part of healing.
That moment of reclaiming his humanity feels monumental. It's not triumph, it's reclamation. He calls in symbols of protection. Lynn, Celta, his grandparents, even fictional heroes like Jessica Jones and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Those figures stand in for the strength he once gave others as a therapist.
Then comes the interrogation memory, the one he avoided the longest. We can feel his body reliving it, the way the officers talked over him, the way disbelief became the default. The trauma isn't just the assault. It's the experience of being unheard, disbelieved, erased.
Exactly. And when he describes imagining Jessica Jones shouting at the police to leave him alone, it's heartbreaking, but also empowering. That fantasy gives him the courage to do what the real world never allowed: defend himself.
By the end of chapter 23, Bruce begins to understand what healing can and can't do. EMDR helps him survive the memories, but it can't erase the label. Society still sees the conviction, not the truth. And that's the cruel paradox. Therapy heals the inner wounds, but it can't heal the injustice that keeps cutting him open.
Which leads directly into chapter 24, the breaking point, December 2019. It's the moment everything caves in.
What stands out to me is how quiet it is. There's no explosion, no dramatic collapse, just exhaustion. Bruce describes it as a slow erosion, the daily wearing away of hope and identity. And it's triggered by something painfully modern. He Googles his own name.
And there it is, the false headline, the permanent lie. An article reposted years later, calling the perpetrator a girl, twisting the story, immortalizing the wrong narrative. After 15 years, the internet still defines him by the crime he didn't commit.
He reaches out for help, calls his prepaid legal service, pleads for anyone to intervene, to remove the false story. But the response is cold. There's nothing you can do. That phrase lands like a final verdict.
It's the same system that silenced him all over again. You can feel the despair, the sense that every door has closed. The suicide attempt that follows isn't impulsive. It's the end of a long road of being unheard.
He drinks, not to escape, but to find courage. He writes to Ellie, apologizing for everything, preparing to say goodbye. And then, unexpectedly, there's a knock at the door. The police arrive, but this time, something is different.
They listen. They don't treat him as a threat. They take him to the hospital in an ambulance instead of handcuffs. It's a small mercy, but after everything he's endured, that act of basic compassion feels almost redemptive.
The irony is haunting. He once worked as a therapist evaluating suicidal patients. Now he's the one being admitted. The man who used to help others stay alive is now the one who barely wants to.
The way he writes about that moment, quiet, exhausted, not dramatic but deeply human, captures what it's really like to reach the edge. There's no rage, no spectacle, just surrender.
Yet even at that edge, he's still searching for meaning, still aware of the irony of his own survival. This is the point where the story begins to shift from merely surviving to confronting what survival even means.
The breaking point isn't just about death, it's about transformation. He survives that night, and the rest of the memoir begins to show what life after that moment looks like. But for now, these chapters leave us in that space between endings and beginnings.
Next time, we'll move into chapters 25 through 27, where Bruce starts to find his voice again. Inside the hospital, in recovery, and through connection with others who understand pain.
For now, this has been Sarah and Marcus discussing 3 Times a Victim by Bruce Whealton. Thank you for listening and for staying present through one of the most vulnerable parts of this story.